And it was all owing to the fact that what seemed like a disappointment was actually a setup to prepare me for what was ahead. Welcome to the Architecting Through Life podcast, where we dig into principles for building ourselves up as individuals while navigating the realities of this thing called life. The podcast is dedicated to young adults and anyone with the deep hunger to grow in their journey of being all that they were created to be. My name is Simon Gubeni, and with each episode I'll be discussing thoughts and insights drawn from life, from the Bible, from unique experiences, as well as from other great minds and mentors. Thanks for joining me on this journey, and I do hope that you'll enjoy today's episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Architecting Through Life podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. And in today's episode, I wanted to share a bit of a story, a bit of a personal story, I guess. And it's an experience which, when I reflected on it recently, because of a recent encounter I had, was something that I thought was worth sharing. So I work and practice as an architect. It's part of my work. And architecture basically involves designing, working with buildings, clients who want to have either their homes, their offices, or various kinds of buildings designed. And it's something which I always wanted to be from the very earliest stages of life. I remember I was probably around 6 or 7 years old when I found out what the word architecture actually even means. I remember I had this book at home and I used to love drawing the buildings that I'd see in that book. Then my mother told me that no, that's done by people who are architects and it's called architecture. And from then on, I had no doubt in my mind about what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so all throughout preteen, teenage years, and earliest stages of life, I always knew that I wanted to be an architect. So I never went through the anguish of not knowing what you want to be when you grow up. But it's always, as with most things in life, never a linear process where you go from A to B directly. And I remember in matric, in grade 12, obviously that's the year where you apply for universities, you do all the things to try and prepare for your future and all of those. And while many people are struggling to find out what they wanted to do, I had in the back of my mind that, look, I want to be an architect. That's really all I want to do, But in high school, I wasn't really the most hardworking of students. And I remember when I applied to university, I applied to about 6 or 7 different universities. And with the hopes that, look, I want to study architecture. With all of them, I applied for architecture. And in some, I didn't even have a second option, that I want to be an architect as that was the intention. And at that stage, having applied to all of those universities, each and every single one of them, when they sent back the response, it was a letter of decline letting me know that I didn't qualify to get into the university. I remember I got so used to reading those letters that I almost knew how it started. When it says, "We regret to inform you that," you always already knew that the rest of this letter just meant that, I didn't get in, And each and every single one of them, around 6, 7 different universities, all came back with a reply that, look, you didn't qualify, you're not fit, you aren't accepted. And obviously you can imagine the disappointment. I remember the last one. I found out about that last one the same week that I got my results. About 6 of them already declined. And then there was that last one which I had hinged my hope on. That, look, if I get my matric results back, then I'll go to that one and then it's going to be done, And the very last week when the results were coming out of whether or not you got in, I went to the university and they let me know that, look, we have your application here. Sorry that we didn't send out your letter, but we regret to inform you that you are not accepted. You didn't get into the university. And I remember, obviously, I was crushed, right? Because I had no other plan in mind about what it is that I wanted to do. I wanted to be an architect. And I remember keeping all of those letters. I kept all of those letters because I was set in my mind that I can't be anything else. Like, I didn't know what else to do, And I remember something that my father said that time, something along the lines of, we might be disappointed, but we're never in despair, and we're not destroyed. Those are the terms he used. That sometimes when we're disappointed doesn't mean that we're necessarily destroyed, And with all the discouragement, the disappointment, took what it was. I was very crushed. I'm actually even downplaying how crushed I was. With a lot of embarrassment, with a lot of disappointment, because I went around telling everyone that look, next year I'm going to study architecture, and obviously people expected it of me as well. And with all of them, I got letters of decline because either my marks weren't enough or because the submission wasn't adequate or whatnot. But every single one of them sent a letter of decline, letting me know that look, you aren't accepted, and yeah, you basically can't come back and study. And I remember coming home that day, and I was very, very crushed. I was very, very crushed after the last university declined. I got home. I basically, yeah, I was very early in my Christian faith as well at the time. I was a few months in my Christian journey. And yeah, I came home, knelt down, asked God why, cried. Then I remember even falling asleep, just with disappointment that day. And my mother just basically said, you know what, look, it's unfortunate that you didn't get into university, but you need to do something about this. You need to, you can't just let this destroy you. You need to do something. Right? So I decided, okay, it's fine. I'll go out, see what I can do. Try to apply to a few colleges, got some help. And yeah, it was about 10 years ago, sure. I then got into a college. And I studied at a college for that year. And in the same time while I was studying at the college, I rewrote my mathematics, my matric mathematics to try and up my marks so that I could study architecture in the next year. But I remember that even though that year was something which was outside of my plans, that year I still look back on as the best, if not one of the best years of my life, in the sense that everything that happened to me in that year, which was positive, happened as a result of what was the disappointment of not getting into university. Some of the best friends that I'd made that year, some of which I still interact with to this day. That year was the year I got baptized. That year was the year I went to my very first mission trip, which will be a story that I maybe share in another podcast. How attending projects which involve me in service actually transformed my entire life. That year was also the year I got to meet, I think I mentioned, awesome people. I got to take part in certain experiences, all of which would not have happened had I gone to university directly. My character changed, my life changed, my experiences changed. And it was all owing to the fact that what seemed like a disappointment was actually a setup to prepare me for what was ahead. And the experiences of that year prepared me then for the next year when I did apply for architecture. I remember I upped my marks, I did well at college, I learned how to actually work hard as opposed to what I was doing at high school. And I grew up very quickly in that year. And at the end of that year, then applied again to university to try and study architecture. And unlike previously, I didn't apply to 6 different universities, but only one because of the direction that I wanted to go. By God's awesome grace, I got accepted into it. And then that began a journey of about 6 long years of studying architecture, right? 6 years, not because of repeating things, which is a disclaimer I always try to add, but 6 years of what is a very long course, from 3 years, diploma, etc., to postgraduate and whatnot. But all throughout the journey, most of what was the positive experiences came from that year, which was at college. I went on to be part of different non-profits, went on to be part of different movements and ministries and things like that, but all owing to the disappointment of the universities. I remember at the last university that declined, when we're doing the interviews before they sent back their decline letter, one of the interviewers asked, so what do you want to do when you're in 10 years time, so to say? What do you want to do in the future? And I remember the answer to him was, look, I want to run my own architecture firm. And I don't even think I understood what I meant when I said that, but I said it, that I want to run my own architectural firm. That was while I was still doing the application processes. And he had this, grim smile on his face, almost such, so to say, oh, really, And basically, okay, it's fine. Went through the interview. I was told the interview was successful, but the application wasn't. So because of marks and all of those things. But fast forward, finished at architecture school, graduated in record time, and at the end thereof, by God's awesome grace, got into a leading architectural firm. And there's this thing that you do in architecture where after you study, you go into work for 2 years. And then after that 2 years, you then get your what's called your professional registration, which basically says you're no longer a candidate architect, but are now a professional architect. And went through that whole process, went through the mentorship, went through the what we'll call a board exam, right, a professional practice exam. And I remember having kept all of those letters of decline, which were saying, we regret to inform you that you have not been accepted as a part of this program. And I kept them because I knew in my mind that, look, I don't want to be anything else other than an architect. And if God is my help, He will be able to get me there, right? Despite what may seem like a disappointment at the time. I recently reflected on that and realized that where I said I'd wanted to be at that time is very similar to where one is at the moment. Now, it's not to say that all things are rosy or even that the journey was a very easy one. You know, there was many losses, many setbacks, many failures along the way. But the reflection is on the fact that what seemed like an absolute disappointment at the time, one could have taken all those letters to say, look, that means I'll never be this thing. Then it means that, all hope is lost, that I should give up. What seemed like a setback was actually a preparation for what was to be. And I'm certain, though I can't put it in empirical terms, I'm very certain that that year which came as a result of that disappointment is a huge part of my having been able to go through that 6-year journey and the post-professional experience, in part because of two main things. The fact that that year was the year where I got to have a real experience with God, the year I got baptized, the year I got, all in with God. And also that the experiences I went through taught me very quickly how unfair life can be, and that it's not going to sit waiting for me, but that one needs to, take charge of it, working hard, growing up, maturing, and all those things. But it's just a very brief, picture of what was filled with many thorns along the way. But the point being that at times what seems like a setback can be destructive, not because of what it is, but because of how we take it. Now, I can say I'm very lucky in the sense that had it not been for parents, had it not been for being in the right place in the right time, had it not been for having had an experience with God, had it not been for a specific perspective towards that disappointment, I'm not sure where else one would be. But it's to say that at times what seems like a setback, there's a man I love, his name is Jerry Flowers. He loves saying that what seems like a setback can at times be a set up for better things. And at times we face different setbacks, even now. So I'm at a point where I'm growing in my own, architectural professional field, taking clients on my own and things like that. Even now, there are things which at times seem like setbacks. Even now on the journey, there are things which seem like, on face value, absolute failures, right? They seem as though they are series and series and series of "we regret to inform you" letters. But at times, it's how we look at those things which determine how we will try and navigate them. And as we go through this thing of journeying through life, we're bound to face a number of quote unquote setbacks. Some more detrimental than others. But at times, what seems like a setback can actually be a setup for better things. I think of Romans 8:28, which says that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and are called according to His purpose. So if you and I at times are finding situations where it's disappointments, where it's things not working out, where it's things not coming together, hope, like, to push through and still hope for the best is something which at the time I might not have realized would bring to this point, but looking back, it all works together favorably. Not to say that things were easy, which is always the case at stories like this. It's easy to think that when one shares an experience like this, it's necessarily to say that one was easy, or things were in my favor, or things were so to say, without any hardship or challenges along the way, which there were many. But reflecting back on where one is now and where one could have been from that experience. I'm thankful to say that all things do at times work together positively when we refuse to let our disappointments capsize us. Story I wanted to share. It was really weighing on my heart. I hope it's an encouragement to someone, and above all things, that it's a testament to the fact that we can really trust God throughout our disappointments. I really, in that year, had such an impactful experience with God that it completely changed my life. And it was because of that disappointment. If I go on a side note, there's a text in Acts 17, which talks about the fact that God, He ordains the times and the bounds of our habitation, that He's aware of the timing of our lives and the placement of our lives. In Acts 17:28, that He orchestrates the circumstances of our lives, which when we seek for Him through them, things then work out towards us drawing closer to Him. I'm paraphrasing the text, but it's the idea that the times and the bounds of our habitation are all there as circumstances which are meant to, in a way, draw us closer to an experience with God. And that disappointment was definitely that for me. And even if not professionally, even if not career-wise, even if I had failed along the journey and not graduated or not have finished the course, that year really set me up for what was a relationship with God that completely set my life up for the better. Even if not professionally, definitely in the decisions and mistakes along the way that it helped me to avoid and to navigate. I do hope that sharing this will somewhat be an encouragement to someone. Otherwise, wish you all the best on your journey of architecting through life. Thanks for tuning in. Much love.